Namo Amida Butsu, Namo Amida Butsu, Namo Amida Butsu, Namanda. Good morning. Now we're in spring. Days are getting longer and warmer and brighter. And what I'd like to do is compare our seasons with what we talked about a few weeks ago, about the way we breathe. We breathe in life, hold and appreciate, exhale and let go, and relax. And then we repeat it again. Breathe in life, hold and appreciate, exhale and let go, and relax. And we repeat it. When we say these words, it helps because we hear and we become conscious of what we do naturally all the time. And that's one of the things of reciting the Nembutsu, Namo Amida Butsu. We become aware of the awakening that we have at any moment, just by saying the words. Also, I would like to take this opportunity to compare it with our seasons, because spring is like inhaling. And then the summer, we could say it's like holding and just appreciating things. In the fall, we let things go. And then in the winter, we just relax, not much to do. And again, the seasons repeat themselves. Spring, summer, fall, winter. But you know what? What happened last year, March of 2020? We were in winter waiting for spring. And then suddenly, winter lasted the whole year. We were inside. We didn't go outside. We were socially isolated. So it was like we were in winter for a whole year. And things were unexpected. We were upset. You know, how do we deal with these things when things don't go the way we think they should? 2 weeks ago, I shared about the myth we have about the Buddha and his birth, and that he took 7 steps at his birth. And that symbolized our human ability to go beyond the 6 realms of, we have the ability to go beyond that and become aware and actually resolve our situation. Now, we do that as individuals, and we can do that as a group and in our entirety as humanity. Now, we do that just with our hearts and minds. In other words, it's our minds that determine, you know, whether we're happy or not. All these things really affect us. And whether it's our physical activity or just our minds, we put all these things and we call it and represent it by calling it Amida Buddha, light and life, wisdom and compassion. Now, last week, Sensei Koichi Mizushima gave 2 terrific talks. He's a very good speaker. And he really kind of tricked us when he said that he was about to give us the secret to life. And just as he was going to do that, technically, you know, he pretended that the waves weren't working right and we didn't hear what he said. But what he was saying was that there's no real secret to this, that truth must be discovered by each of us. And so there was another part in his talk that was very interesting. And I failed to pass the test because he had us watching and counting the number of passes that the team with the white shirts had, and to count the number of passes that they made. And so when we were concentrating on that, I didn't even see the gorilla that walked through the whole process. And that's kind of how our lives are. We're focused on these other things that distract us, and we don't see the gorilla in the room. And so these things are really indicative of how our lives are led, that we're easily distracted and we lose our focus. Now, I'd like to add to what he said about seeking truth. And I'd like to share with you Shunryu Suzuki's thought on the truth according to the Buddha. And what he said was that the Buddha's truth could be said in 2 words. Okay, now listen carefully. Buddha's truth in 2 words. Not always so. Hopefully you got that. Now, sometimes we think that enlightenment might be caused by, you know, an awakening so that everything after that becomes clear and everything is resolved. And we kind of seek this big enlightenment. And then we wonder why it's so hard and difficult to reach. And that may be so, not so. It could be that it's these little awakenings that help us. That just by solving little problems, like everything else, there is a process. And as we work and realize that we can change our minds on small things and solve little problems, then we might be able to see a larger picture. Now, our thoughts might be that our problems are out there. Other people, other things create our problems. But what the Buddha taught us was that it's up here. It's our minds that determine whether we are happy or not. Now, the Buddha experienced life as a prince. And he also struggled. He left that life and he struggled as a penniless monk. And neither of these extremes were satisfying. And the Buddha looked out into the natural world and he saw that there was balance, that everything seemed to be in harmony. Now, some things are pleasant and some things are not, but there is this middle path, and that's what he taught. Now, this is what we were doing at the beginning of this talk, breathing in, but we also have to let go and breathe out. Breathe in and let go. So everything is this balance. Often we think more about breathing in and not so much about letting go. And when we thought about what happened last year in 2020, when we had this long winter season through all the time where we stayed at home, and it was like a long winter, you know, we were upset because life was not like what we expected. Not always so. Not always so. So we are humans and we have the ability to change our environment. And we've made a lot of progress, especially in the last 100 years. You know, if we're too cold, we're able to turn on the heater. And for those of us who may have air conditioning, if it's too hot, we turn on the air conditioner or go to a store that has one. We have clean water. We're used to good sanitation. We love some fruits that may only be ready in the summer. But what do? Our stores get fruits from the other side of the world. And so we have these things continually all year round. We just get used to it. We want our buildings and furniture to be comfortable. Our cars, trains, and buses and so forth have to be faster. We have great medicine and healthcare. So things have changed a lot in the last 100 years, and we've gotten accustomed to this. And this is what we expect. And sometimes life isn't like that. We're focused on, you know, the passing ball. We get distracted, and we may not see the gorilla in the room. So with the Buddha, he was a prince, and yet he left that life. And that might tell us that money is not the solution to things. And sometimes people with the most money have the most problems. They're concerned with keeping it and wanting more. And having nothing also was not the answer, but it is the middle path, a balance. So we can look and use the life of the Buddha as our guide. Now, the Buddha encouraged us that as humans, we can alleviate our painful situation. And he said that our physical lives are an illusion. And as I said, that may be true, because what we're enjoying right now as, let's say, middle-class Americans are beyond what people may have thought about 100 years ago. And I think we're middle class. If you're watching this on a computer, then perhaps our lives are comfortable. And we've taken these things for granted, but this has come at a cost. We've taken from the earth more than we've given back. And we're living lives like kings and queens. And so our life, I think, is out of balance. There are inequities in life. And so we must look at not only our individual self, but our greater selves, not only our community, but the whole world. And we do see that there are many inequities. You know, there are many homeless. There are people who are working all the time, and yet they can't afford rent for an apartment. All this is something that we're a part of and we're contributing to. The clothes that we can buy cheaply is afforded because perhaps some of these big corporations are not paying their employees very much. And so what happens? These employees have to depend on government, government subsidies of food stamps and other things. And who's paying for that? We are, in the sense of, our taxes. And so we're supporting these corporations, and we think that we're getting these cheap products because workers are not being paid enough. So there are many inequities, and we're a part of all of this. Now, this week, we're celebrating Earth Day. And Rimban Don Castro has said, being a Buddhist is being an ecologist. And he says this because we know we are interdependent. We're part of all things that go on, even though we may not see this. And so we need to look at the gorilla in the room, such as global warming, the lack of resources, the abuse of power, and all the inequities in life. Where did these come from? We're part of it. We've created these situations, and also we can resolve them. So when we hear that we're running out of clean water or cheap oil, clean air, all these things, we get upset and we blame others. But we can resolve these if we change our minds and see our involvement in this. People complain that they have to wear a mask, and they're most upset because they can't go out to a restaurant to eat. Now compare that to how many of us in the Japanese American community experienced 75 years ago during World War II, being incarcerated in camps, usually in the deserts, places where conditions were terrible. These are places often where our Native Americans have had to settle in the reservations. And this went on for several years without knowing when there would be an end. And today we have people complaining about these inequity. So we see that we are not having the expectations, and it is our expectations that may be causing our suffering. And so from the beginning of this talk, I talked about how simple life can be, just breathing in, holding and appreciating and letting go, and then relaxing. Life can be very simple, and yet we seem to complicate it. And if we are to resolve these issues, we might look at our own lives to see how comfortable we are and what we might be deciding for the future. Because ecology is really based on how we interact with the earth, not only with other humans, but all life forms and all the resources of the earth. And we have young people who are helping us. We have Greta Thunberg, who's warning us about global warming. We can change things around. In the 1960s, the San Francisco Bay was being filled in because there were cities and corporations finding that it was useful to fill in the bay so that they could increase land. San Francisco Bay was going to be San Francisco River. But three ladies, Sylvia McLaughlin, Kay Kerr, and Esther Gulick, got involved, and they started the Save the Bay group. And because of that, they stopped many initiatives where people were trying to use the bay to fill in. And so again, it was regular people seeing the problem and working to resolve that. We have David Hogg, who was a survivor of the Stoneman Douglas High School shooting, who's talking about gun control. All of these things are part of what we're involved in. And so what I'm asking is, how might we get out of these situations? Each of us is able to determine this. So let's not be distracted watching that ball, again in the film that Koichi Mizushima showed us, that we're so concentrating on watching the ball being passed among the players with the white shirts that we miss the gorilla passing by in that room. So we need to wake up and decide our future. So I ask you, what we can do. I've been advocating the thought that each of us must practice, not practice to achieve anything, but a practice to wake up, to realize what we have already received. And so I ask you, what can we do? What one small thing might lead to a small group or perhaps a larger group? and perhaps to all of humanity, because we are part of all humanity, all of this earth, because of this truth of interdependence. So think of what we might do in this coming week as we celebrate Earth Day, as we are part of the solution as well as part of the problem. And we wake up to this each time we voice Namo Amida Butsu, oneness with infinite wisdom, compassion, light, and life. And so with that, I ask you to join me in continuing to express our gratitude for things that we have received and take our part in resolving issues where there is imbalance and create harmony and balance for all. Please join me with Nembutsu Gassho, Namo Amida Butsu, Namo Amida Butsu, Namo Amida Butsu, Namanda.